Hey, let's learn acid base. Now, I know there are 1,000 ways out there to learn acid base, and if one of those are working for you, that is great. Stick with it. But I like this method because rather than memorizing a bunch of arbitrary names and numbers and metabolic acidosis or respiratory alkalosis, I was able to understand what was going on, and it's called the first name, last name method. And you start off with a pyramid. Now let's talk about pH. We know a normal pH is 7.35 to 7.45. And the lower that number, the more acidic they are, and the higher that number, the more alkalytic they are. And if the range is from 7.35 to 7.45, 7.4 would be perfect. Now this side of the pyramid, we're going to dedicate to acid, which would make this side of the pyramid alkalytic. And these lines continue on conceptually, but we have to put a stop to them somewhere. So on the acid side down here, we're going to put 7.35, and on the alkaline side, we're going to put 7.45. Now, there are two lab values that affect pH. There's the respiratory, or the CO2, which ranges from 45 to 35. Now, notice I wrote this backwards. So the 45 is on the acid side, and that's because the more CO2 you have, the more acidotic you become. The other value that affects pH is the metabolic, or the HCO3. And normal ranges are from 22 to 28. Now notice that the lower number on the metabolic is on the acid side, and that's because the less HCO3 I have, the more acidotic the patient is. And that's because HCO3, or bicarbonate, binds with hydrogen ions, and that's really what acid is hydrogen ions, and it becomes CO2 and water. So if you add acid to something with HCO3 in it, the HCO3 disappears and ultimately becomes CO2 and water. So the less HCO3 we have, the more acidotic the patient is. Now, we're going to have a first name and a last name, and the first name is going to be either respiratory or metabolic, and the last name is going to be acidotic or alkalytic. Let's start with a opiate overdose patient, and let's say they have a pH of 7.32. They have a CO2 of 70 because they're not breathing very much and they're retaining a lot of that CO2. And they have an HCO3 of 25. So, figuring out the last name is real easy. 7.32, that's on the acid side of the pyramid. So the patient's last name is acidosis. So now we have to look at these other two values. So if we start with HCO3, we'll see that that falls within the pyramid, right about there. The CO2, or the respiratory, is 70. So it falls way over here on the acid side. So we're looking for the value that matches the last name. Well, HCO3 is inside the pyramid, but the CO2 is over there on the acidotic side, and that's respiratory, so we know we have a respiratory acidosis patient. Let's try a few more. We'll erase these. Get rid of those guys. Now let's say we have a patient, we'll give them a pH of 7.31, a CO2 of 42 and an HCO3 of 16. So we know that the last name is acidosis. So now we just have to find the value that matches it. Well, CO2 is 42, which is right there inside the pyramid. HCO3 is 16, which is going to fall on this line outside on the acid side. So we see that the metabolic system, the HCO3, matches that last name of acid. So this patient is metabolic acidosis. Now, one more little curveball for you. Sometimes the body will try to compensate and pull the pH the opposite direction, but this method still works. So let's try one last one. Get rid of these numbers for you so we don't confuse you. All right, so we're going to go the other way and say that this patient has a pH of 7.48. They have a CO2 of 28, and they have an HCO3 of 21. Now, you probably notice that both of these values are off. The CO2 is way too low, and the HCO3 is a bit on that high side. But we start with the pH, and we know that this patient has a last name of Alkalosis. So now we just have to find which of these values match that last name. Well, the HCO3 is actually an acidotic name. It's 21, which puts it over on this part of the pyramid. The CO2, or the respiratory, actually falls here on the alkalosis side, so it matches the last name. So, and that's the respiratory system. So now we got respiratory alkalosis. What's going on is the metabolic system is trying to decrease the pH to balance, and sometimes you'll see the unaffected system trying to pull the pH the other way, and I don't want that to confuse you. You're looking for the value that matches the last name. I hope this helped. I know it's cliche, but if you can like and subscribe and share this video, it would help so much with the YouTube algorithm. And if you have any other topics you want us to cover, please leave it in the comments. Until then, be safe.